The Insta360 ONE RS, ONE X2, and the original ONE R are three of the best cameras to come out over the past 2 years. However, they share a lot of similarities and a couple of differences. So by popular demand, I'm making this video to answer the question of which one should you buy? What's the difference between them? Should you wait for the next Insta360 camera, or should you buy a different 360 camera completely? So let's start with photo and video specs. And like I mentioned in my last video about the ONE RS, the specs are nearly identical to the previous two Insta360 cameras when it comes to flat action camera type video as well as 360 video. Sad face. With the exception of 6K widescreen mode for flat video up from 4K and 5.3K, and 48 megapixel flat photos up from 12 megapixels that the original ONE R had. However, despite having identical resolution to the previous two cameras, do the photos and videos from the ONE RS look any different? Now, I'm not going to bother with flat photos because I just don't see why you'd use these cameras for that purpose. But when I put all three together side by side in this virtual tour type environment, strangely enough, I think the ONE X2 is actually the sharpest and has the best dynamic range of all three. You'd think it would be the ONE RS, but the ONE X2 is outperforming it. So no, I don't think this is an upgrade for 360 photos, nor would I recommend any of these cameras for 360 photography when there's better options like the other cameras I cover on my channel. Unless you're shooting for social media, in which case all three of these cameras would be a great option for capturing catchy reframed 360 photos. Where they do thrive, however, is 360 video. Here I put them side by side in my new office, all in their respective HDR video modes, and straight up they look really similar. Well, aside from the ONE R, which seems to expose the video slightly darker, resulting in slightly better exposure outside but darker foreground objects inside. Otherwise though, I can't pick these three apart and I'd say they look pretty much the same. Taken outside and they all have damn good stabilization, and even the colors, the dynamic range, and everything looks the same. By the way, those little black things intruding in the shots are the lens of the other cameras. It's not a stitching issue. So again, the images are the same. The ONE R looks slightly darker just like it did inside, and perhaps slightly bluer straight out of the camera, but of course that can be fixed in post. So I'm afraid to say there's practically no difference between these three cameras when it comes to 360 video, which is both a good and a bad thing because this quality is the norm in 2022, at least for now. In very low light, I found the ONE X2 to outperform the ONE R and ONE RS marginally, with slightly better sharpness all around. I want to be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test, to train them is my cause. I will travel across the land, searching far and wide for these Pokemon to understand the power that's inside. Next, I want to compare the ONE R and the ONE RS for flat video quality. This is 6K widescreen mode on the ONE RS versus 4K 30 FPS on the ONE R. What is the difference? That is the question. Good question, Ben. Well, I would say that, yeah, the ONE RS does look slightly sharper. If you look at the reflection on my eyes, you'll see that it's a little bit crisper on the right hand side. Even though the 6K isn't 6K horizontally and vertically, it does look sharper with the ONE RS, despite the ONE R having more vertical resolution with the settings I chose. Okay, this is Insta360 ONE RS in active HDR mode versus Insta360 ONE R in normal HDR video mode. Is there a difference at all in the dynamic range? Again, great question, Ben. Well, looking outside, and it's completely blown out with both cameras. It was fairly bright and cloudy here, so I think most cameras would do the same in video mode. However, I am actually noticing better dynamic range inside with the ONE RS. If you look at the window frame, the contrast is a lot better and the lines are sharper with the ONE RS. Here's another side by side of active HDR versus HDR video, and yeah, again, the One RS definitely does look better. There's more detail in the clouds as well as the shadows of the trees. You can see more detail in there. And I do think that this is a pretty killer feature of the One RS. So if you shoot action type content and you want that really good dynamic range with everything you're shooting, I would just permanently be using active HDR mode because it should deliver the goods in most situations, whether it's handheld or static, as long as you have an adequate amount of light. Now let's talk about low light. Now here's a side by side of the One R and One RS, both using the 4K mod and the exact same manual settings. And the blue background of that photo is much grainier with the One RS. Hold on a second, isn't this supposed to be better in low light? I mean, not only does the new 4K mod come with a slightly bigger sensor, but also the aperture opens wider than the previous 4K lens, which should, on paper, produce a less grainy shot than the One R. I can't say why this is exactly, but I put them side by side in a few low light situations and I consistently got the same result. The One R outperformed the One RS consistently. So whether this is just my camera is yet to be determined, but for now let's just say that the One RS's 4K mod is nothing special in low light yet. Here's hoping they fix this with future firmware updates to release the true potential of the upgraded camera specs. This is where the 1-inch mod comes in. Because it has an inbuilt 1-inch sensor with both cameras, it will deliver a far superior result in low light than the 4K mods will. As you can see, a pretty similar level of grain here and much better than before. And overall, the 1-inch mod will produce better video quality than the standard 4K lens, especially in mixed lighting like this soccer game. Here I shot it again and it actually looks kind of cinematic. I can't believe I'm saying that about an Insta360 camera, but absolutely the quality is there. So if you shoot a lot of flat action type content, then the 1-inch edition would be an absolute necessity if you choose the One RS as your camera of choice. One thing that definitely has improved since the original One R is the design of the One RS. Like I mentioned in my review video, it has a bigger battery, it has an extra mic, as well as this windproof cage, which definitely does improve the sound, and the new cord that they upgraded from the last One R. And despite these two looking quite a bit different, don't forget they're modular. So the accessories I've got, like the boosted battery on the One R, can also be used on the One RS. Is it enough of a cosmetic upgrade to upgrade from this to this? No. Now you might be wondering if any of the other features that these cameras have differ much. And the answer, again, is no. They all do live streaming, they're all waterproof, they all make those cool and catchy shot lab effects, and there's quite a lot of these handy features. However, I can't think of any of them that are unique to one camera only, except small things like inbuilt flow state stabilization on the One RS, but again, that's not enough to justify upgrading from one to the other. Now, I don't know if you remember when I first released my review on the One X2, but basically my comment when it first came out was, yeah, it's a great camera, but it's not that different to what we had before. They did fix some of the design problems and even added some unique features to the firmware, but it was really only a 5 to 10% upgrade given the specs were identical. And that's exactly what they've done with the One R as well. Like I said in my review, this is a small upgrade that made it more like a One R 1.5 instead of 2.0, but you know what, that's okay. If you're a first time buyer, you would rather the One R 1.5 than the One. So from now on, just pretend that the original One R doesn't exist. If you are sold on the idea of buying a modular action camera that also turns into a 360 camera, then the One RS is obviously going to be the go-to from Insta360. So which one of the three should you buy? Well, let's start with a price comparison. So the One X2 is $429 outright. I'll link it below. The One R, it does seem like they might be moving towards phasing it out because the twin edition isn't available. The 4K and 1-inch are. 1-inch is $549, 4K is $299. Then with the One RS, the 1-inch is $549 and the 4K is $299. Again, the exact same price as the original. If you want the twin edition, which comes with a 4K lens and the 360 lens, it's going to be $549. Whereas it seems like they're not selling the twin edition of the original One R anymore. It's grayed out and it says $479. So if you want to use it like you would a normal GoPro, it's going to be $299. If you want to use it as a 360 camera, however, you have to buy the 4K lens and the 360 lens lens, which bring it up to $549, which is a bit more expensive than the One X2. So I would only consider buying the One RS if you're someone that would use a GoPro and you want a dedicated 4K action camera that also doubles as a 360 camera. But if you're not into that, then you'll be best going with the One X2. But should you upgrade? If you already own the original One R, no, don't upgrade to the One RS. Because it's modular, you can buy it piece by piece. So if you accidentally scratch the 360 lens, you can just buy a new 360 lens. If you want to upgrade just the 4K lens, you can do that. And I just don't see a reason to buy the whole camera again. Should you upgrade if you own the original One X2? No. Like we saw, the 360 footage looks pretty similar. So the only reason you would do that is if you decided you wanted a GoPro-like camera. So that would basically give you two cameras in one. But like I've talked about, it's not an upgrade for 360 photo or video, so it doesn't make sense to upgrade. Should you upgrade to the One RS if you own an older 360 camera? Like this, or this, or this? Abso-freaking-lutely, it's about time you updated. What took you so long? I would just again go back to whether you are a dedicated 360 shooter or you want to shoot a bit of both. Ooh, here's one. Should you upgrade to this if your primary focus is 360 photography? No, I don't recommend this if you were, say, shooting virtual tours. Instead, I'd recommend the Trisio Lite 2 if your budget is under $500. I have a review on my channel. Or ideally the Theta X if you can afford it, which is currently $800 US. The results you'll get with both of those cameras will leave the One RS in the dust. In the dust. Now I know I've been brutally honest in my last two videos about the One RS, but I don't want to spoil it too much. It is technically a good camera and it's one of the best 360 cameras available right now. So if you think Mr. Ben is raining on the whole Insta360 parade, I'm really not trying to. I'm just trying to be honest about the marketing and presentation of cameras that appear new, but in reality, they're only small upgrades that aren't worth paying the entire price of a new camera for. And I think you absolutely could make that argument about subsequent GoPro releases. If we're being honest, there's not always that much of a difference between GoPro cameras. Anyway, long story short, it's still an awesome camera and I absolutely recommend it, especially if you're upgrading from anything older. I do have full reviews of all three of these cameras on my channel, so I definitely recommend checking them out. Now to wrap up this video, I want to share some brief thoughts on whether there's going to be a new Insta360 camera that you should potentially wait for. Well, are they making a new camera? Yes, of course they are. When's it coming out? Could be tomorrow, could be next week, could be next year. But I think it's unlikely that it's going to be anytime soon. This is because they just released the One RS and they're probably not going to minimize their own camera release by releasing something within the next 6 months. That said, my future prediction for the next Insta360 camera is the One X3. That will be their next release and I think it's going to be within the next 8 to 12 months. So time will tell whether that prediction is right or not. Guess you'll have to hit that subscribe button and we'll both find out together. And that's it from me. Leave your thoughts on these three cameras down below and I'll see you in the next video.